All seniors should watch this video. It's a phrase that may sound restrictive at first, but for those who have witnessed the changing seasons of life over decades and carry in their hearts the precious memories of loves lived and lost, these words resonate with deep meaning. The following story speaks to those who understand that wisdom comes not only from years lived, but from deeply felt experiences and painfully learned lessons. This is the story of George, an elderly gentleman who, at the age of 70, found himself standing at a crossroads that many of his peers might recognize. After decades of building a life, raising a family, and establishing himself in his community, he discovered that retirement had brought with it not just rest but also an unexpected yearning for companionship that he hadn't anticipated. In his search for new meaning in life's golden years, George became involved with Marina, a woman 20 years his junior. She possessed the kind of vitality that seemed to light up every room she entered. Her presence was magnetic. The way she moved, the confidence in her stride, the sparkle in her eyes when she smiled, all of it reminded him of a youth he thought was forever behind him. Marina had that rare quality that made everyone around her feel more alive, more present, more significant. At least that's what George thought at first. Little did he know that behind that radiant exterior lay shadows that would eventually eclipse the very light that had drawn him in. The brightness he so admired would prove to be more like a flame, beautiful to look at, but capable of burning those who got too close. From the very beginning, the signs were there, though George, in his enthusiasm and hope, chose to overlook them. His closest friend, Robert, who had known him for over 40 years, pulled him aside at their weekly chess game and expressed his concerns. His daughter Sarah, during their Sunday dinners, would give him worried glances when Marina's name came up in conversation. Even his barber of 15 years, Tony, who had heard all his stories and knew the rhythm of his life, cautiously suggested that perhaps this relationship deserved more careful consideration. But George's heart, despite its 70 years of beating, still held the capacity for the kind of hope and desire that often overshadows reason. He needed, to prove to himself that he could still be a worthy partner, that the wisdom and tenderness he had to offer could compensate for whatever youth had taken from him. This desire, initially just a quiet whisper in his mind, gradually transformed into something more consuming, more urgent, an obsession that colored every decision he made. In the early days of their relationship, Marina seemed to know exactly what to say and do to make him feel like time had reversed its course. She would touch his arm gently while laughing at his jokes, lean in closely when he shared stories from his past, and look at him with eyes that seemed to say he was the only man in the room. Her compliments were precise and powerful, targeting the very insecurities that had grown with each passing year. "You're more interesting than any man my age," she would say, or, "I love how confident you are, that only comes with experience." George found himself restructuring his entire life to accommodate her preferences. He changed the restaurants he frequented, bought new clothes that matched her taste, even started using expensive skincare products she recommended. His morning routine, which had been comfortably consistent for years, now included exercises she suggested would keep him young. He even began dyeing his hair, something he had always sworn he would never do. But as weeks turned into months, subtle changes began to appear in Marina's behavior. What started as gentle suggestions about his appearance became more pointed criticisms. Her once admiring glances were replaced with looks of barely concealed impatience. The very things she had claimed to love about him, his methodical nature, his thoughtful approach to life, his careful consideration of decisions, became targets for her increasingly harsh comments. The transformation was so gradual that George hardly noticed how her behavior was affecting his self-esteem. What began as occasional jokes about his age evolved into regular reminders of their age gap. She would point out how he moved more slowly than her previous partners, how his stories sometimes meandered, how his careful approach to intimacy lacked the spontaneity she desired. Each comment was like a small cut, individually insignificant perhaps, but collectively creating a wound that grew deeper with time. The situation reached its breaking point during what should have been a romantic evening celebration of his 71st birthday. Marina had arranged dinner at an upscale restaurant, but throughout the meal, she made countless subtle jabs about his age. When he took a moment to catch his breath after climbing the restaurant's stairs, she rolled her eyes and muttered something about dating a grandfather. When he needed more light to read the menu, she made sure everyone nearby could hear her commentary about senior moments. The final straw came during their intimate moments together. Despite his efforts to be attentive and caring, focusing on her pleasure and comfort with a tenderness that came from decades of understanding what true intimacy meant, she became increasingly critical. She would compare him unfavorably to younger men, making cutting remarks about his stamina and abilities. What should have been moments of connection became exercises in humiliation. One quiet Sunday morning, as George stood before his bathroom mirror, the reality of his situation finally crystallized. He saw in his reflection not just the physical signs of age, the wrinkles, the gray hair, the softer jaw, but also the wisdom earned through 7 decades of life. He remembered the young man he had been, the father he had become, the grandfather he now was, and realized that each role had added not just years but layers of understanding about what truly mattered in life. It was then that George made the decision that would reshape the rest of his life. With a clarity that only comes from facing hard truths, he realized that no relationship was worth the systematic destruction of his self-worth. The wisdom he had accumulated over his lifetime finally spoke louder than his fears of loneliness. He arranged to meet Marina at a quiet cafe they often frequented. With dignity and composure that surprised even himself, he explained his decision to end their relationship. "I may be old," he told her, "but I've lived long enough to know that love should lift us up, not tear us down. You've shown me that youth isn't always a blessing if it comes without kindness and respect." Marina's reaction revealed everything he needed to know about the rightness of his decision. Rather than showing understanding or regret, she lashed out with more age-related insults, proving that her beauty was indeed only skin deep. George stood up, left enough money on the table to cover both their coffees, and walked out of the cafe with his head held high. The months that followed weren't easy. Loneliness, that old familiar companion of the elderly, came calling again. But this time, it was different. This solitude had dignity to it, a sense of choice rather than circumstance. George gradually rediscovered parts of himself that he had set aside during his relationship with Marina. He resumed his weekly chess games with Robert, started volunteering at the local library reading to children, and even joined a senior hiking group that met twice a week. Most importantly, he began keeping a journal, recording his thoughts and reflections about love, age, and self-worth. He wrote about how society often makes older people feel invisible or irrelevant, but how that invisibility is often self-imposed when we accept others' limitations of what we can be or do at our age. 1 year after ending things with Marina, George's story took an unexpected turn. At a community garden event where he volunteered, he met Eleanor, a widow close to his age. Their connection was immediate, but different from anything he had experienced before. There was no need to prove himself, no pressure to be anything other than who he was. Their relationship developed slowly, built on a foundation of mutual respect, shared experiences, and genuine appreciation for each other's company. When Eleanor held his hand, it wasn't with the passionate urgency of youth, but with the warm understanding of someone who had traveled similar paths. Their conversations flowed effortlessly, filled with both laughter about life's absurdities and quiet reflections on its deeper meanings. She appreciated his gentleness, his attention to detail, and most importantly, she valued the very things about him that Marina had criticized. Looking back on his experience with Marina, George realized that it had been a necessary chapter in his life, teaching him valuable lessons about self-worth and dignity. He learned that true companionship isn't about trying to recapture youth, but about finding someone who appreciates the person you've become through all your years of living. For those in their golden years who might be facing similar situations, George's story offers several expanded lessons worth considering. First, remember that the wisdom accumulated through decades of living is invaluable. While society often glorifies youth, there's an irreplaceable depth that comes with experience. Don't let anyone make you feel less worthy because of your age. Each wrinkle, each gray hair represents a story, a lesson, a moment of life fully lived. Second, understand that loneliness, while challenging, should never be the primary reason for staying in a relationship that diminishes your self-worth. The company of someone who doesn't respect you is far more damaging than being alone. Use solitude as a time for self-discovery and growth, rather than viewing it as a punishment. Third, recognize that intimate relationships in our later years should be built on mutual respect, understanding, and appreciation. Physical attraction may bring people together, but it's emotional connection and shared values that create lasting bonds. Never let anyone make you feel inadequate because your expressions of affection differ from theirs. Fourth, maintain your connections with longtime friends and family. These relationships often provide the support and perspective needed to make wise decisions about new relationships. True friends will tell you what you need to hear, not just what you want to hear. Fifth, remember that it's never too late to start over, to set boundaries, or to choose self-respect over compromise. Age should bring not just physical changes, but also the confidence to stand up for your own worth and dignity. This expanded story touches upon universal themes that resonate particularly with those who have lived long enough to understand that love, in its truest form, should always enhance our sense of self-worth rather than diminish it. Whether you're single, widowed, divorced, or considering a new relationship in your golden years, remember that your value isn't determined by your age but by the wisdom, kindness, and dignity you bring to every relationship. If this story speaks to your heart, share it with others who might benefit from its message. After all, the greatest gift we can give to one another is the reminder that at any age, we deserve to be treated with respect, understanding, and genuine appreciation for all that we are. Your years are not a limitation. They are a testimony to all you've survived, learned, and become. Wear them proudly, and never let anyone make you feel less worthy because of them. In the end, true love doesn't see age. It sees the soul, and a soul that has lived and loved for many years has more to offer than any surface beauty ever could.